All right, hey guys.
Hey,
This is the first time we've said hello. We've been on for like 5 minutes, but we're just saying hello. We've got
no,
Dan with us today.
me and Dan had a nice little chat while
Oh, you
you
guys
were
talked. I
struggling.
can. Okay, I can go back
Yeah,
and listen to it later. That'll be fun.
yeah.
We've never met. Dan, you have you met Dax? Have you guys met?
No,
Not
No.
really.
This is the
Just
first
on
time.
Twitter.
Yeah, Twitter.
yeah,
Does Twitter count? I don't think so. How are you, Dan?
yeah.
You're in the UK. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So Dax just got back from Europe, and we had to bring a little piece of Europe onto the show today because he missed it so much. Is the UK Europe? Is that even Europe?
From American point of view, I'd say
Okay.
yes.
So many
So
things from an
how do
American
you
point of view are
feel? Do you
different.
feel European being in London?
Mm, I guess like on the world scale, sure. Yeah.
Was it more European before Brexit? Is that the main reason it's no longer European? Is
I
that?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean
Is
just
that like?
from like technical legal aspects, I don't know.
Yeah. You were originally from Russia, right?
Hmm.
And you just like you could pick anywhere you wanted to live, and you chose the UK. Is that you went from Russia to the UK?
Yeah, I mean it was kind of random because I've never really considered the UK as a place to go to, because I didn't know anyone who went there, so I just didn't consider it as a possibility. But then I did get a job offer in UK, and so that's how I ended up here.
Oh, gotcha. So you took a job in the UK. Wait, where?
Yeah,
Who was that with?
that was Facebook.
Oh, in the UK. Okay, that makes
Yeah,
sense. Yeah, I guess they're everywhere, probably.
yeah, I didn't know that either. So
Yeah.
I was like, wow,
It's
that's
got like Silicon Valley offices, and that's it. I don't know.
yeah.
That stuff really blows my mind because I was telling Dan earlier that so Cloudflare has an office in Lisbon where I visited, and they were telling, and the guy that I met there was telling me like the history of it. So they originally had a London office, and he was explaining how London was like the New York of Europe. Like no matter what you wanted to do, like if it was tech, entertainment, finance, that was like the place. Uh, and then after Brexit, they had to consider other places, so they moved to Lisbon. But then they were talking about how like there's great engineers there they wanted to tap into, and me having never really been a part of a company that scale, it's mind blowing to think like you're so desperate for engineering talent that you have to literally like search like globally for it. Like you need so many people that you need to like have offices everywhere just to tap into like whatever talent is around those areas. It's like really crazy as someone that thinks about hiring like one or two people at a time. Like, yeah, I'll be able to find someone, locally, but yeah, these
Yeah.
companies think completely different.
How many engineers work at Meta?
I actually have no idea.
Yeah, is it like
Like
hundreds? Is it
it's
thousands? Like
thousands. Yeah, it's
thousands.
somewhere in thousands. Yeah.
That's insane. I've just never worked anywhere where there were even like 500 people. So I don't I don't have any context. Not even like engineers, just like
Oh,
people.
I
Yeah.
think like you don't really like interact with all of them at the same time, right?
Oh,
So I
right.
think
Yeah, yeah.
that is more of a concern for like people building like tooling, right? Like you need to make sure that like continuous integration can work with like commits land in like every
Yeah.
minute and so on. But other than that, I think it's still like I worked on a pretty small team, and like I work at Bluesky now, which is like a super small company, but then in terms of like team dynamics, it actually kind of feels similar just because it's like, well, there's like 7 people or so who are like actively constantly like doing something together, so it's
Mm,
actually not that much of a difference in some ways.
Yeah. Yeah, so there is a
yeah.
company that makes Blue Sky. It's not like just in the Fediverse or whatever. Like you guys all
I
just
thought it was
shake
pronounced
hands.
Bluesky.
Blue skis.
Yeah, there is a company. I think it's incorporated in as a like public benefit something something.
Mm,
I don't understand the legal stuff
Yeah, yeah.
well enough to say, but yeah, it is definitely a
That's a
company.
normal job at a place that pays you to work there. Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. But everyone
and
is
how
remote. Like pretty much the entire team is remote.
Yeah, I feel like
how
if you're
big is the
creating a
team?
company, oh, go ahead. Sorry, Dax.
No, yeah, how big is a Blue Sky team?
I think it's like like the entire company is like under 20 people, I think,
Oh wow,
so
that's a
far. Or
Wow.
maybe
big
we
shift.
just crossed 20, but I think it's like it was under
Yeah.
20.
When you joined Meta, did you have to interview? Like, what was the process like when you're like kind of a very specific type of hire?
Yeah, I mean it was like I went through kind of the normal process, although under maybe strange circumstances because I was at a conference and I was given like my first kind of big conference talk, and I was talking to Jin Chan, and like I talked with her before, she's like one of the co-inventors of Flux architecture, and she just mentioned that they have a London office, which I had no idea that they do because I couldn't actually go to US because I didn't have like you had to have enough education or like enough years of experience to get H1B, which I did not.
Hmm.
Um,
It's like
and
getting
so
a
I didn't really,
mortgage here
yeah,
in
I didn't
America
really
too.
consider that as a possibility. And yeah, and she said that they're hiring in UK, and so because they had a bunch of speakers from Facebook at that conference, they actually arranged kind of like an impromptu interview cycle where I just skipped the second day of the conference, and they interviewed me in a hotel basement.
Are you serious? That's awesome.
That's incredible.
Yeah, I love when people find little side doors like that. It's great.
Dan, I don't expect you to remember this, but we actually have a little history that goes way back to that time frame. I emailed you in it was like 2014 or 15 or whatever it was, right before you joined Meta, because I was using Redux at my startup, and I emailed you to try to hire you at a company called StatMuse. And you were very polite. You responded. You actually responded to me, and you were like, "Sorry, I'm
That
actually
was
taking
when I
another
was
job."
still responding to
Yeah,
things.
I got in right before Facebook, and I got a response. But yeah, we have that
Oh
history.
wow.
I didn't expect you to ever remember that, but the company's still around today. So you might have chose the wrong company. I'm just saying, StatMuse still a thing.
That's funny. So you left Meta like a year ago? It's been or so?
Yeah, yeah, it's actually been almost exactly a year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was like what made you want to look for something new?
I think like I wanted to try like something new for a while, but
Hmm.
it was just like never the right time because there were like a bunch of things that I really wanted to see them kind of completing, and I was also working on the React documentation website. I really wanted
Hmm.
to like get that over the finish line, and that took a couple of years more than I thought. Um, but like when like all the work seemed done, and we also hired a person who I thought like was gonna be able like to take over a bunch of just like developer kind of relations thing that I was doing without it actually being my job. Like we hired a
Yeah.
person for that job. Then that person got laid off, which was like completely wild. And then we complained, and I don't know, like we managed to rehire that person in our
Oh
org.
really?
So
Wow.
yeah, because
That's
like this
awesome.
person was in a different org, and so yeah, that was just like uh, a few wild weeks. But we rehired this person, and I just felt like okay, this is the time. And I was getting pretty excited about Blue Sky, like in general. So
Hmm.
it just felt like, okay, now this actually makes sense because I previously I thought maybe um, wouldn't like I wasn't actually planning to work at the company at all. I was thinking maybe I just become like a YouTuber or something, or like sell courses or whatever. And that might still be like I don't know. Maybe that would have been like a more kind of rational choice. But it just kind of clicked like on a bunch of levels. So I thought, yeah, this is the thing I have to do now.
Yeah.
Well,
That makes
how's
sense.
Blue Sky? Like, I haven't been on it. I think I got on Blue Sky when I got on all the other Twitter alternatives as Twitter was going up in flames. But I haven't been since. How's it? What's the scene like? What's it like over there?
Yeah, I mean it's kind of like a mix. I don't know. We have I think like we have a few communities that like really settled.
Hmm.
Um and I think like tech community hasn't really settled there. So there are like a bunch of people who signed up, but then like the conversation wasn't really flowing, and then people left. Um, we're working on a bunch of things, like just like making the app better. We didn't like one problem is like we're still catching up in terms of baseline features because like the way we build things is kind of like more with this decentralized angle where we want it to not be tied to one company in terms of the implementation. But then from the user experience point of view, like we think it's bad if that leaks into the user experience.
Right.
So like
Yeah.
when you look at your feed, it kind of looks like a normal Twitter feed, even if it gets pulled from like different data servers or whatever. Or like if you move like where you host your data, like that doesn't affect, like nobody, like your like counts don't disappear or whatever. Like it just looks normal. So that, that way of development kind of, it takes a little more time to do some things. So we're still catching up just in terms of functionality. Like we just added DMs like literally a couple of weeks ago. Even though DMs are actually like a centralized service, so we're not doing like a end-to-end decentralized thing for now because that's like a huge chunk of work and people just need DMs. So that's been like a
Mm.
huge pain point for the community. So we kind of refocused a little bit on like working on the product and like we added like GIF support, working on videos now, but we're still catching up. So it's I think like and also just like making the app feel better, feel faster and stuff like this. So it's a process, but we're excited to make the app better for next time you check us out. So
Yeah, is Blue Sky the Jack? That's the one that Jack is part of, co-founded something?
not really.
Or no?
The
Am I
the
thinking?
really
Is that Mastodon?
no so no no so he's
Okay.
like the relationship with him is kind of interesting from I guess like the PR angle because the way it happened it's actually kind of a funny story because he he used to run Twitter, right? He was the CEO of Twitter, and he funded this exploration of what would it look like if Twitter was not the sole company kind of making the rules, but
Hmm.
if it was possible to kind of move this move it out to the protocol and have different companies be able to like host your data and kind of interop while it would still work with the Twitter client. So that was kind of the original vision for the project. It was kind of decentralizing Twitter, the company, and like making it interoperable. And they assembled a bunch of people in a chat room. And these people were like people who explored decentralized social media for the past decade, with like very different views on like how it should work. And so they didn't really agree on a lot of things, and so the project was
Mm.
kind of stalling for a long time. Which is, it's pretty hard to find people with different opinions, get them to agree on something.
Like Twitter,
Um,
like the
yeah,
actual experience of being on Twitter. Yeah.
exactly. And so one of those people, Jay Graber, she kind of compiled like a review of pros and cons and of different approaches, and what are their kind of technical or like user experience implications and stuff like this. And Jack chose her to lead that project. And so she was supposed to actually like get hired at Twitter and lead that project at Twitter because that was part of
Mm.
Twitter, the company. But Jay insisted that that's actually not the right way to do it because the incentives don't match up, and there is a
Hmm.
risk that Twitter would shut down the project, or that like if she works on it within Twitter, that actually uh, works against the goals of the project. And so she kind of like it took like a bunch of like I think she kind of fought with him for like 6 months, and then like they end up agreeing that it should be like a separate, completely separate company, and like Twitter would get like a board seat, and Jack would get a board
Mm.
seat, and so
Okay.
on. And then Twitter funded originally this project, so Twitter just paid some money to the project. But then she also kind of set up some like there was a like a clause that if Twitter, that doesn't want to continue working on it, then I think they lose the board seat, and so like it's not, if they stop funding it, like they also don't really, they stop controlling it,
Yeah.
in that way. And so that's effectively like what happened with when Elon Musk took over Twitter. He kind of canceled the project, and so the focus shifted from just working on the protocol for Twitter to okay, like we have a reference implementation of a client, let's make
Mhm.
it into like a real app because because like Twitter is not going to integrate their client with us.
Right,
And so
right,
that's
right.
kind of how the project started. And Jack has not been actively involved in the like in the running the actual project. I think like the lead engineer Paul has only like talked to Jack once. So
Yeah.
it's not, it wasn't really like he wasn't really present, and then he gradually just like changed his opinion. He became like more enthusiastic about like Bitcoin stuff and some other projects, and so his interest kind of shifted, and then he left the board. I think like a couple of weeks or maybe like a month ago. So
Okay.
he's not really present.
Got it. So you're
Yeah,
not working with Jack every day. Sorry, go ahead, Dax.
yeah. No, I was gonna say that makes sense, and like, yeah, I do wonder if his interest shifting because I think in this space there's basically a spectrum, right? There's the very centralized services that we're used to, and then there's the extremely decentralized ones. And I'm sure you guys look at things like Farcaster, and there's like a few other things in this category, right? It sounds like Blue Sky is trying to figure out what minimum you can do to make it a little bit more decentralized without losing like the typical UX that people expect. Uh, if that, I mean, does that
Yeah,
sound right?
I
Yeah.
wouldn't necessarily say minimal. I think we do
Mm.
want to essentially, make it very plug and play so that it feels more like the web.
Yeah.
I
Or
think
like
like
email, I imagine, like kind of
yeah,
similar, right?
yeah, email is another analogy. But we want to make, but I think it's architecturally it's closer to the web. So
Mm-hmm.
it's the idea, like the technical idea is really kind of that, when you like post something or you like something, you really kind of push into your like behind the scene. You don't see it as a user, but like behind the scenes, it's kind of like you have a repository that's hosted somewhere. So like, and we're kind of like GitHub, right? Like we're one of the
Mm-hmm.
hosters of these repositories, but in principle, you could run your own. You could like there could be other providers. We're like opening up to for other players to kind of join that. And then we have our own like indexer. So it when you like the indexer kind of crawls this repository, so you can think of it kind of like Google crawls the web. And so that indexer is like all the events from this repositories flow into this one single funnel, and you can subscribe to it. So like anyone can subscribe to the fire hose of like everything that happens on Blue Sky. It's kind of like like an event log of everything in the
Mm-hmm.
system. So you can listen to it through like a WebSocket or something like this. And then we have there's something called app view, which is like a materialized application specific view of the network. So Blue Sky
Mm-hmm.
is the only app, well, not the only, actually, like somebody else is making like a plugin platform now. But this is like a thing that listens to the events and just like updates like a snapshot of the database so that it's easy to query, and that's what the client talks to. And so this
Yeah, I
is
see.
why like it's really decentralized in terms of like how you store your data is decentralized. We're also decentralized in moderation. So we have our own kind of hard-coded moderation service that you have to have if you use our client. But in principle, we also offer other people to run their own moderation services. So there are like community, you can like have your own like moderation, and like people can submit posts to you. You can tag them with your own like labels and stuff. And this can be used for like both kind of serious things and less serious things. And the client is able to like actually show it. So for every aspect of like social media, we kind of want to give people ability to like compose it, but then present it in a very cohesive way.
Yeah, that's cool. So if I never want to see anything about React, I can just have a React free feed.
You could have, so like we have somebody running a so because these moderation services, they they can be manual, they can be like AI driven, like somebody you can do
Yeah.
whatever, like if you're a developer. One developer is running a labeler that labels all screenshots from Twitter. So you can subscribe to that
Oh,
labeler,
interesting.
and you can say like hide all screenshots from Twitter, never want
Oh,
to
that's
see
very
them.
cool. Yeah. That's really funny. So with this model, do you feel like, like you were saying earlier, like simple things are a lot more challenging, right? Like it takes you a little bit longer to build something that's straightforward and centralized service. Do you feel though, like given enough time, the experience is basically the same? Are there certain things that feel like impossible to ever do without centralized system?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I'm not like an expert on all the like backend stuff, so I'm
Mm-hmm.
I'm just speaking from my knowledge. I think eventually you should be able to do everything that you can with like maybe slightly different trade-offs.
Hmm.
Um, but we have gaps right now. We have like one significant gap we have is that we have no great way for non-private for non-public information to be kind of integrated. So although we do have, like your personal server will like store your like authentication stuff and like private settings and stuff like this, but it doesn't kind of integrate into the whole network in a nice way. So it's
Hmm.
hard to build features. For example, we don't have locked accounts yet. So
Hmm.
if you post, like your posts are public, you have like private like preferences, right? But you can't have like access control to like your posts. And this is something we want to build. But it's just going to require like a bunch of thinking of like how does this actually work in a distributed system. And so there are like different options, and it's probably gonna be solved like within like a year and a half, but not today.
Yeah, that makes sense. And the other side of it is, so typically, if someone's founding a social media company, they run it in a very specific way, which is like entirely focused on growth and like getting like the viral coefficients, like all the things that a social media company does. You guys are also building like new technology. Are you still like focusing on growth right now and trying to make that happen, or like is that kind of a later thing? How are you guys thinking about that?
Yeah, it's kind of it's interesting. Like we've kind of shifted a little bit into that. But
Hmm.
the thing is like initially, the team was very small. It's like the entire app. So the app is built with Expo and React Native, and so it works like on Android, on iOS. It's like an actual native app. It and there's like a web version as well. Um, and it was built like by a single person over like several months initially.
Oh, nice.
Now there is a team, but it's um, like at the time, it was kind of like almost like a research project. And then when Elon bought Twitter and like this whole thing happened, and uh, a lot of people were interested in like in an alternative, and because they had a reference client, the team started kind of investing into it. And so the demand went through the roof, and actually like the growth, that was really like unexpected. And that's why they had to set up this like invite code system,
Yeah.
not like a like maybe many people think it's a growth hack. The thing is like the architecture like literally did not scale yet, so like if we let
Okay.
in all the people, like
It's
everything
an
would just
anti-growth
crash.
hack. Yeah,
Yeah.
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 And so like there was a lot of demand. I think some of it kind of calmed down, and now it's kind of more like level. Um, but yeah, I think like the biggest thing we're seeing is just that people who come with their clusters and kind of settle in, like some of them like having a good time on the app and like retain, and then some people like they come and then like for example like maybe their friends already have accounts but like are not actively posting, and so they kind of fall off as well.
Mhm.
So we're working on different kind of community focused things to you can think of it like in terms of growth, but I think another thing is retention, right? It's
Yeah, right.
like, okay, somebody signed up, but like how do we actually make the app useful to them? How do we make them want to like stay there? All these like social kind of dynamics of like, well, why do you come there? Like, what do you find? So we have a few communities who really kind of settled in, and we're investing more into those kinds of things.
and
Yeah. And then good.
I was just gonna ask, like, you work on you mentioned the back end team. You work on the front end, so like people people ask you to like add buttons to things. Like Dan Abramov is just like making the front end of Blue Sky. That's how this works.
Yeah, yeah. I fixed a bunch of borders. Like there were like borders broken at some breakpoints. Today I was fixing an Android animation stuttering after we upgraded React Native.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
it's like
Yeah, how's
Android is interesting.
I'm assuming I'm just guessing, but I'm assuming this is like a lot more product work than you used to do. Like, how's that transition been? I imagine it's nice, right? Like, I find myself going from framework work to product work, and product work feels like very straightforward compared to like framework stuff in a very satisfying way. So I was wondering like what your experience has been like.
I think it's a mix, really. I mean, I'm enjoying it because I like this type of product. So like I
Hmm.
was like a very engaged Twitter user, and the goal is to make something that's better than Twitter and kind of retains like the magic of Twitter, but also improves on it. I don't think we're like anywhere close yet, but like we're slowly starting to get there. So that's exciting. In terms of just like product work versus like framework work, I think some of the product work is nice. So, it's cool to, yeah, just like fix something that was broken. Now it works, or like polish like an
Hmm.
animation or something like this. Like that's kind of fun. I don't necessarily like enjoy like creating new screens or things like this. Like that's just like
Me
stressful to
neither.
me. Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
like not good at design, to be honest. So we didn't even have a designer until like a few weeks ago.
Oh,
So
nice.
I'll be honest, that splash
I
screen, it was a giveaway. The big sky picture, like I don't know.
it's we have changed it a while ago. It's
Oh,
actually pretty
okay.
cool now.
It'll be waiting for me
Yeah.
when I try it again. Yeah.
Yeah, no, we had a designer on contract, so like we had a
Hmm.
designer who helped us with a bunch of stuff, but they were not like super integrated into the process, and so we hired the first designer who's like really integrated. But I think in terms of work, like the parts, there's also just like all kinds of random shit, right? It's like today, like we're dealing with like we released an update yesterday, and it's crashing, like it's just insta crashing for some Android users,
Mm.
and it's maybe like I was diving into like a bunch of there's like 10 levels in the stack, right? There's like React code, product code, there's React, there's Expo, React Native, like actual like native bugs, like Android weirdnesses and so on. And it's just like, well, like which level is the problem on? And these kinds of things are not super fun. Like, why does
Mm.
Android not show keyboard unless you like at set timeout 100 or whatever?
Right.
So like this kind of stuff is like not super fun. And also you have to move
Yeah.
a lot faster. Like with I feel like with framework work here, usually like you can really think through the fix because like it's more important to get it right. Whereas like if everything's on fire, like maybe you just add a hack and like fix the hack later, or like never fix the hack, and it's just hard for me to kind of adopt to that mentality a little bit because I'm used to like trying to fix things properly. But I'm
Wow,
also like
I've never
slowing
done
down the
framework
team a
work.
bit.
It's clicking for me now. Like I've never had to think like I should fix this the right way. Just always just junk,
Yeah.
just throwing junk at stuff all the time.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because Dan has a post from a really while, like a long time ago. I don't know when, and I don't even remember what the post is called or anything, but it definitely impacted me a lot. I think you were talking about the philosophy of building React and how keeping React internals is not keeping React internals clean is not a goal because the whole point is to absorb the complexity. I think
Yeah.
product work is kind of similar where yeah, like that hack isn't great, but the goal is to like, get stuff working for the user. So keeping your internal stuff clean is not necessarily a goal. Of course, any pathological case of this is not good. Like you still need to find a balance. But yeah, that line or that post was it like really changed how I thought because whenever I worked on product code, I was like really wanted to make sure it was like maintainable for the long run, which does make sense, but a lot of times you do sacrifice capability or absorbing complexity and things like that. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Um, so what does like success for Bluesky look like? Like the near term? Like what's the next milestone for you guys to achieve?
Yeah, I think we'd like to improve retention,
Mm-hmm.
uh, because a bunch of people signed up, or like also reactivate existing users. So like a bunch of people signed up, checked it out, but like nothing was happening there. Part of it is just like we had pretty poor onboarding, so you don't really find the people you want to find. The
Mm-hmm.
search was not prioritizing people by like we now have something like PageRank, so it's actually really
Mm.
good now.
Nice.
Like you find the people you probably like expect to find when you start typing. We didn't have a good algorithm, so because like algorithms are kind of swappable on Blue Sky.
Right.
So there's the one that we maintain is called Discover, which actually kind of acts more like a for you feed, but we're doing like a lot of tweaks there. So we just added like an A/B testing framework a couple of months ago, so that we're able to actually try things. And for example, like we had an experiment where we showed more content from kind of mutuals or like
Mm.
things that are popular like liked by your mutuals in that feed, and so we saw like, oh, that leads to like 4% increase in like post likes or whatever, right? So we're like
Yeah.
able to kind of start tuning things so that they're actually, there's like so many things that you don't really think about that like go into making like a nice social experience. So just, I think like get into a point where somebody can sign up and find the people they want to, they kind of vibe with, and just like not run into like constant bugs and
Yeah.
crashes or things like this. um, and just stick around. I think making that outcome more likely is like the top goal right now.
Yeah. Which is very hard. Like it's very
Yeah,
straightforward, but very difficult. Yeah.
yeah, and one of the ways we're kind of thinking about it is we really want to empower communities. I think
Hmm.
like Twitter hasn't really focused on communities. Like it's kind of more like celebrity driven, and that that worked out in that time frame. Like I don't think like we can't like repeat like Twitter's
Yeah.
history. Um, but there are things that work about Twitter that for example, like there's no, Twitter has a product called communities, but it's not really like
It's
the
so bad.
React community. Yeah, it doesn't
It's
really
really
feel
bad.
like it captures. The actual communities are outside of the tab, right? They're like in
Right.
the home,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
so we want to kind of formalize that a little bit and make it easier for people to discover like what's actually happening on the app through like human curation and just like groups of people who are like kind of part of the same scene,
Yeah.
so to speak.
Networked.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I think, yeah, just making it easier for communities to find each other and have fun with each other. That's like the kind of short term goal. And for the long term goal, I think there's like different goals for the app and the protocol, right? Because the app
Mm.
is kind of almost like a reference app, but actually the underlying technology doesn't care which app you're building. So these like
Mm.
repositories that I referred to, you can store anything there, and then you can like say like this record was created, and that's gonna go into the fire hose, and like the fire hose doesn't care what kind of record it is. So if you build an app that listens to the fire hose and that posts to these repositories, you can build this like materialized view where you're like, okay, I'm only interested in these types of records. So you could build like a blog, somebody's building like a blog engine on top of this, but then it's a bit like underdocumented, so it's not super clear how to do this. But in principle, you can build these apps where they can kind of read each other's public information, right? So you could integrate information from like different apps that all live within the space. They kind of use the same like identity system that's like we're trying to kind of standardize. So I think the success for the protocol in like long term is just that this is like another way that people can build apps or like web apps that is like very kind of open and integrated. And the key part is that you can always like if you're unhappy with the app, like somebody can build an alternative that uses the same data that already exists, so that you
Yeah.
don't get locked into these platforms.
Yeah. This has been like an interesting concept for a while because I guess like the first era of the internet was all about network effects where whoever dominated a network just held that dominance forever. And you can see that with Twitter where despite, all the issues with it, like it's still extremely used because purely because of network effect. And it's possible that the next generation of the internet eliminates network effect as an advantage because it is like a weird monopolizing thing, like once you get it, like you can
Yeah,
never lose it. Whereas in your model, you have to compete on the experience, nothing else. You can't compete on, well, we have users locked in or data locked in, we
yeah,
can't
yeah.
leave. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. It would be crazy if that's how the internet evolved because that just seems better overall.
Yeah, I think it's like it's a little bit idealistic in terms of, well, how are we
Right.
gonna compete with like, but then if you think about it, like it's pretty cool that we do have a community. Like there's like a really passionate group of people. They're not like necessarily technical. A lot of them are not. Uh, a lot of them don't care about, which I think like is actually like a
No,
success
good.
for
Yeah.
decentralization. Is like
Yeah.
they don't fucking care about it. They're like,
Yeah.
what is this protocol thing? Like, I don't want to hear about it. Why are you not working on DMs and videos?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a goal. Like it's obviously like the people that really care about technical details are always a small vocal group, but you have to make this stuff invisible. And if you don't, you're just never going to be something that is
Yeah.
massively adopted. Yeah, I just opened up the app again. It feels totally
I
different.
did too.
Feels
It
it
does
feels
feel
really
totally different.
nice. Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow. Good job.
I'm reactivated. You're just gonna have to go on more podcasts, one person at a time. You can just
Yeah, we're
hook
gonna
them
show
in.
up in
Yeah.
those that reactivated number in their metrics.
Well, we need to we need to get those Android crashes fixed
Yeah, there you
first
go.
because
So when
that's
you run
embarrassing.
into issues like, and you discover it's like a React Native issue, are you just like DMing people and they fix it immediately? Is that how this works?
I just rant and like sometimes people respond, but I feel bad because I think like I've gotten a lot more like ranty. Just like, like, why is no one working on this? Like, text inputs don't preserve the position like of the caret. Like, isn't this like, the thing that like a text input should do? Like,
Right.
uh, but like I know that like the team is very busy. There's a lot of improvements they're working on that are actually like long term bets that we really need. So it's like I think like React Native is moving into a very good direction with new architecture, fixes just like a bunch of architectural flaws that it used to have, and we're also kind of digging this approach of like we get to like iterate super fast. So we built the UI for DMs, direct messages, in like 2 weeks for iOS, Android, web. So that's pretty cool. And like
Yeah.
most of the code is actually reused. But then for cases where like you want to fork by platform, you can do that at a component level. So you can even like fork like a wrapper component. So like on
Mm.
Android, it should like present like this, and like iOS, it should present like this. But then the stuff inside is shared.
Mm.
So it's like a very powerful way to build. And we also hired a few people who know a little bit of native, like when the React is just like not cutting it. Um, that's like how it works at Facebook as well. Like they don't just write everything in JavaScript. They write native modules, and then you just interface with those native modules from JavaScript. So we have like a few things that are like this really needs to be like a native Swift thing, but we wrap it and then we use it as a React component.
Mm.
I'm actually getting ready to build a big Expo app for StatMuse. So I actually care about this stuff. Like this sounds very fascinating. I didn't know you could do the wrapper thing. That's incredible. Like an
Yeah, I think
internal, it's
more.
like a, yeah,
Yeah, people don't realize that. It's very interesting. Like I think there's like a lot of like native developers often think, oh, it's just like web views, so they don't even like
Yeah, right.
realize that
yeah,
it's native. And then like React developers don't often realize you can use native stuff there. So it's really like when it's good, it's like the best of both worlds, and when it's bad, it's like the worst of both worlds.
yeah.
So
I just
it's a little bit of
remember
a mix.
like we built the first app for StatMuse like 8, 9 years ago. It was a long time ago, and it was just a Swift app. It was just for iOS, and I can remember the horrors of like the App Store and all that. And I've heard Expo makes a lot of that better, like provisioning profiles
Yeah,
and all this stuff.
yeah, it's great. Like I'm a huge fan of Expo. We the like I don't think we even like pay them any money. Like maybe we use some service. Like I'm not sure for like build and stuff, but it's just like the amount of value we get out of it is completely incredible. It papers over so many native issues and even like React Native issues. Like it's like if a real framework on top of React Native.
Yeah.
It has like its flaws, but overall it's just amazing how much time it's saving.
Yeah, yeah. I used it like even like maybe 6 or 7 years ago, and even then I was like, wow, this just some of like the developing experience and like being able to pop stuff open on your phone and stuff. Yeah, it's so much better than native. Are you guys also using or if you're not already using it, you're gonna use it like React Native for web? Is that the direction you're going, or is that going to be totally
Yeah,
different?
so that's what we're using now, because that's what like Expo uses for kind of like as a web target. So that's
Hmm.
what our website uses. It's not amazing. It's like I think like it compromises in a bunch of ways that are you can still fork by platform, right? So like we actually like I forked the list implementation because like React Native was doing when the React Native web was like kind of mimicking virtualization that React Native is
Right.
doing, but actually it's a bit too complicated. It doesn't quite make sense on the web. I think like the way scrolling works is not quite what I wanted, so I just like rewrote that component to just be like a plain list, and that's what we use on web, and it listens to like window scroll. Like it
Yeah.
integrates with normal scrolling instead of doing its own thing. Um, but it's kind of the longer term thinking there's I think we're very aligned with what like Meta is doing now. So Meta is exploring kind of the opposite route where it's called React Strict DOM, where there's like a subset of DOM tags that are like on the web, it would just be directly targeting those tags. So you would use like div and p and whatever, and like use
Hmm.
whatever props are in the web standard. And you have these like APIs like intersection observer, resize observer, get bounded client interact, like all the stuff that you're used to from the web. And then so on the web, there's actually going to be like no kind of thick compatibility layer because React Native Web is a little bit thick. But with this approach, it's more like you write kind of targeting the web almost, except like a
Hmm.
subset. But React Native has a shim for this that is like pretty thin and is like nicer than the shim that's on the web. And gradually those things get built into React Native itself, so it would
I
like the
see.
shim would get thinner. And so I'm pretty excited about this approach. I think this aligns more with like what we want. So we'll probably migrate to it eventually.
So so you have a web app currently,
Yeah, yeah.
and is that server rendered? Like, how does that work with React Native Web?
It's like fucking megabytes of JavaScript. We need to add we need to
Dax
add
is all
for
about
splitting.
megabytes of JavaScript.
I
Oh
He's
love
right,
it.
yeah.
he's into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this is a social media website. Like this is actually
Yeah, it
like a
doesn't make
case
sense. But
where
yeah. It's like
like
short
we
sessions.
want
People get
to
linked. People click on links from other places. Yeah, you need to like be fast and minimal. Makes sense.
yeah,
Yeah.
we want to like I think like there's a lot of like low hanging fruit there, but the problem is just like we're not in a great place right now to we can run JavaScript on the server. We already do for some stuff, but just like SSR is not integrated with Expo, the version
Hmm.
that we're using like very well. And then like in the future, there's like they have like a new router and stuff like this that we don't use yet because we started the project earlier.
Hmm.
That's like much more kind of server friendly. So I think we'll want to move towards like an approach that's closer to like how Next.js does it, like with SSR, like server components would be nice. I don't know how many years we have to wait for that in Expo, but eventually, and like in general, I think like another constraint we have is that currently like our client is very much again like it's like appish, right? It's like it's like a thick client,
Hmm.
and that's not ideal for a bunch of reasons for us. Like we often want to do some stuff server side to kind of pre-process it before sending it to the client. But the problem is right now our server is kind of the API server for Bluesky. So like other clients, people building
Oh,
other
I
clients
see.
also talk to it. So it has to be like a version. We have to be careful about like what we add there. We can't really like do like a single pull request spanning both sides. So we're like if we had time to invest in it architecturally, I think we would add kind of like a BFF layer,
Right.
back end for front end, like stands kind of in front of it, and that is really conceptually a part of the client, but it just happens to run on the server, and so that would let us like iterate better and like move some things like more fluidly between both sides. But for now, we're like, yeah, like fucking React query, But I love it. But it's just like we do a bunch of things on the client that really belong on the server, and this actually negatively affects the user experience. So we need to like start fixing it.
So it's interesting to think about your transition. Like if a year ago you left Meta and you went to Blue Sky, and now like you just got done like working on your baby with all this new React stuff, and then you go and now you're working on a React Native app and you don't get all the things you just built
Yeah.
at your disposal. That's kind of painful. Like,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I wasn't like building all of that myself, right? Like mostly
right.
I was explaining how the stuff works, like fixing some bugs and contributing in some ways. But
But
yeah,
like
it's
into
like
the
painful.
ideas of it. Like those were
Yeah, it feels like going back 5 years, really. It was like,
yeah.
oh. Uh,
So what is your? I mean, I know this stuff is like loosely defined, but like, what is your relationship with React? And I've also always been curious. what is Facebook's like? How does Facebook think about React and like staffing the React team and like how it gets funded and yeah, like how do they think about all that stuff?
Mm. Yeah, I don't know if that changed. Like, I don't know what's the latest because it has been um like there's a lot of investment into it, and
Mm-hmm.
I think the way the investment gets motivated depends on like who is the person who's like in the org chain, who's
Right.
like whose job it is to convince the people above.
Right.
So like it's I think like that approach is like maybe different.
Hmm.
Also depending on like who are the people above. So like that has also
Right.
changed a couple of times. Um, but I think like you know for a long time, like React was kind of like a central thing. Like that's how ads work. Like the ads,
Mm.
all the ads interfaces, all the like, the whole money making thing. Of course, like it was used for like consumer side as well, but it was used less. It was like, comment, share. That was kind of like the initial place where it was adopted. But the ads manager, like the thing where you create ad campaigns, like that was like all React, like
Mm.
pretty kind of fast, like it converted to React. So this is like one of the biggest React apps out there. It's a complete mess, of course. Like it has patterns from 2012, mixed with like every like 3 years somebody invents a framework there, and so it's like it has like five different frameworks. It's completely wild. But that was like a big, like of course like React team needs to stay funded because that is the primary thing that like
It's the
all of this is
moneymaker.
built up.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But then there was this whole transition to just like rebuilding the web experience. So that was like 2017 or so, Facebook.com. And that was rebuilt in React, and that was at the same time as we were like, well, client only isn't gonna cut it. Like that's not really practical. I know a lot of people don't don't want to hear that, but like for like at Facebook that was just like a non-starter. Like it was
Hmm.
obvious. No, like if you rebuild the consumer experience, you have to use the service because like consumer machines just can't do a bunch of stuff the service can do. And it just happened that we were kind of invested into this like foundational, like a lot of our approach was really almost like theory driven. It was like, well, it doesn't make sense to do this because here's a more efficient way to do it. So like we might as well build this and it will make sense. And then we found all the ways. Yeah, it does actually make sense. It does actually solve these problems. So we were working on like concurrency and just like rendering being interruptible so that if you start doing something else you don't wait for the whole cycle to finish, like streaming, being just like removing all waterfally processes from like
Hmm.
the entire thing, and also kind of changing it so that the slowest, if there's like one thing that's slow, it doesn't penalize everyone. It kind of penalizes the thing that's slow.
Right.
So you can kind of, because like if at a big company there's always going to be like parts of the code that's slow, so you kind of want to limit the kind of the damage from it, so that like other engineers can kind of be like, oh, this thing is in the pop-up, but actually this pop-up is like lazy, so we're not going to spend CPU cycles there unless it's like, but we can like warm it up maybe. And like React can do all this kind of coordination because it knows about the user interface, and how you structure it. And so we've been making all these improvements, and I think that with the website, like that project has worked out, although it was pretty wild. Because we were like rebuilding the foundation of React at the same time as like the entire website was being rebuilt on top of it.
Hmm.
So it
Fun.
was like quite like full of fires. But that worked out, and I think currently like it's also used on native in a bunch of places. Like the Facebook app itself has like 1,000 screens built with React Native. They're not like kind of primary like scrolling experience, but there's just like a super long tail of that stuff. And some apps are fully built with React Native. And I think like I don't know if it's still the case. Like I think one of the kind of longer term, again, like we need to motivate like why why fund React, right? I think for Meta it's like one of the strategic, like Meta doesn't have a um, kind of a platform, right? Like Google
Hmm.
owns Android, Apple owns iOS. So Meta doesn't really have like a first class, like here's our stack, here's our language, here's this. And React is very much kind of in that vein. Like I think if they go
Mm.
into their whole like VR, AR vision, like React is being used there. So I think like there is a something like, kind of like the long shot. I think is um, we need to keep investing into this paradigm, and we'll make this like paradigm work really well on our own like hardware or software or like operating system or whatever, and we'll be able to like have this developer mindshare of like people already know how to use this. um so I think partially it's like that is kind of the longer term story, whereas the shorter term story is just like, well, it's like every we have a lot of stuff that's built with it. So I think that's kind of like how Meta maybe thinks about it.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's, yeah, it's super interesting. The platform thing I never thought about before. And then so now that you're
Well,
not
don't
there,
quote me on this, but also
no.
like I'm not involved now, so that's that's kind of my understanding of like how
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
no,
about
it's
it.
it's a good theory. So I mean, now that you're not there full time, so anything you do now related to React is just you personally doing that on your time. Is that how that works?
Yeah, and I don't really like. I thought I'd have more time, but honestly, like, yeah, we're just like, we need to fix like, why is the light box not showing the whole image on Android? Because like the status bar height needs to be subtracted from like,
A
because
lot
it's
of
broken.
Android
Like,
issues sounds like. So,
sorry, that's just been my day.
yeah.
We fixed like four things in one day. We need to cut. We actually need to cut a patch because like, yeah, people can start the app. Um, but yeah, I'm not like super involved. Like I'd like to maybe like come to meetings, but I think I was also ramping up. Like I was just like learning React Native, and it was like how, it was actually hard at first. I think I've mostly learned it now, and I also moved a little bit into management. So like I'm doing like a mix of like management and IC work. Um, so I don't really, yeah, I don't go to like React meetings, but so I crashed them a couple of times when I had something that I cared about. So I'm hoping maybe like with some time I'll be able to be like a little bit more involved. But I did send a couple of pull requests for React 19. So
Nice.
Nice, still
Can we
active.
can we shift gears into something completely unrelated to all this?
Yes,
But I
love
really
it.
want to get Dan's opinion. I mean, Dan, you've worked now at two like major social media companies. You're obviously a very prominent participant in social media. And this is just top of mind for me because like I guess the current meta on Twitter right now is like, but like kind of the framework thing where people are going at each other. Do you think the internet is mean or too mean? Like, there's this kind of like cohort of people right now that are sort of very vocal about, stop picking on me. This is like, I've worked very hard on this. But then there's the other side where it's like, it's nice to like sharpen each other and we're like challenging each other and your app is broken and it's okay, my app's broken too. Do you have thoughts on all this? Is the internet too mean?
yeah, I mean I've seen some of it. I don't know if it's meaner than it used to be. Um, it seems I think the largest shift like I'm seeing is just um I think people who are kind of like entertainers, and I'm not saying this like in like a bad way.
Dax and I feeling called out.
We're sitting here with our super fancy cameras, like.
Yeah.
I think there's
Ooh.
just like a lot more of that than it used
Yeah.
to be.
That's
Like
true.
it's kind of like a bigger niche and like more prominence. And I mean, I think it's a valuable service in some ways, especially if you have some experience with like building things for production. Great,
Yeah. Yeah.
because I think we don't hear from those people always a lot. So it's nice when people like share like things that they know in a digestible way. I think some of the I think it's gotten a little bit more dramatic than it used to. With the whole like YouTube videos, like, oh, I'm gonna make a video about this, and then there's like, just feels like, you can just like quote post like, why? um,
Yeah.
so it's in some ways it feels a little, but I'm also like I think I'm staying out of it more. I used to enjoy it more, and I think now I'm like, yeah, whatever. Um, but in general, I think I like the internet. It has good and bad parts. But I think it's again kind of going back to this topic of communities. Like I think different communities are gonna have like different norms.
Yeah.
It's they're kind of fluid. I like, I like the fluidity of Twitter. Of like you can't really say like what exactly is like this community because like some person might like start pulling it into like a different direction, or there might be like a new branch of it, and
Mm.
so on. And so I think like I'm kind of interested in like building tools for people to kind of have this kind of like fluidity, but also have discovery. And then,
Yeah.
if different communities have different norms and have like some ways to kind of enforce those norms, or at least like just like be chill, like within their space, and maybe like somebody else has like a different space, then we can like experiment with it. I think that's really valuable.
I think there is a place. I don't know, like I'm not smart enough to say what it should be, but if Blue Sky worked on the community aspect of like sub communities and having tools for that. I felt like we needed that on Twitter. And when Twitter launched the communities thing, it's like something between Discord and Twitter, where like Twitter is just like
Yeah,
a mess of public everything. And we all kind of collide and it turns into just like the drama.
yeah,
I mean, it really just kind of like devolves to drama. But like they built the Twitter feature for communities. There's an AWS community that I started, and a lot of people in it, not a lot of tools for like managing that community, and it just becomes this crazy filter for spam. I mean, just like
yeah,
they
yeah.
didn't really invest in it. So if Blue Sky could like make that thing that I feel like should exist, that seems like a good path. I just gave you my 2 cents.
Yeah, I mean we're pretty excited about this direction as well. There's it the other thing is just like again we're just building the foundation, so I think this is one of the things where maybe because it also kind of feels like a Twitter clone right now, right? Like and like in a lot of ways we're like, okay, let's not like reinvent the wheel. Like here's like let's check how this thing works on Twitter just so we match the baseline of like what people expect and kind of this like accumulated wisdom. um but I think yeah, like communities is one thing where we really think no, like it should be there's like a different way to do it that is more compelling. So stay tuned. Maybe
Yeah,
in a couple of months you'll see something
I mean
if we're
we're
not like dead
reactivating.
by that time.
Yeah. Man, this is a thing with building companies or products that's like it's the way it is, but it's so frustrating because you have to spend a lot of time doing the baseline before you can do the things you actually want to do. And like the baseline often means like getting to a place where your company can even exist long term. Like you have to do all this upfront work, and it's not even like the thing that you actually really are excited about. So yeah, like this stuff requires just so much patience. It's just like you just imagine all the things you want to do, but like it's not things that it's things that you like get to do if you reach like a baseline level of success. But it's like the only reason you started doing everything. So yeah, that's always been my like big pain with just building companies from zero. It's you're just waiting for that day we can flip over to the fun stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this has been fun stuff. Go ahead, Dak.
No, I was just gonna say, going back to the drama thing on Twitter, I found it yeah, it's really interesting to me how people interpret stuff online. I think people have like wide ranges of things. Like from my point of view, I have very clearly two tones. I have one tone where I'm just completely messing around because I think it's funny, and I have another tone where I'm serious. And to me, it's like very clear. Like when I'm just complaining about Next.js, like that's me being funny because I like being this funny character that just hates it irrationally to like a crazy degree. And I find that fun, and like a lot of people, reply. And I had a few people.
I actually think that's kind of mean.
No, I know it's mean. I know it's mean. But okay, so here's a dichotomy for me, right? I care a lot about Next.js users. I spend a lot of time helping them do what they want to do. So the reality of it is like I actually spend a lot of time on this stuff, and like I care about this community. But for me to blow off steam, I like pretend like I think it's the worst thing in the world. And if you notice, I never talk about anything technical. I'm never like, here's a technical problem with Next.js. I'm always like, if you use Next.js, you're going to be single forever. It's just stuff that's totally not based in any reality. And then for me, that's just I get that's annoying. I totally get that for some people, that's like the most annoying thing ever. But for me, that's like my outlet. Like that's like the way that I like,
Well, for what
inform
it's
myself.
worth, like I think, like this format actually kind of humanizes it, right? Like I think like Twitter Spaces was like a step in the right direction in this
Yeah.
sense, where kind of lets people you just kind of when you see the person, I think it feels different. Like you can be like a one-dimensional character, but also there's like a little bit of like, oh, here's like the 3D version, and then it feels a bit different. So yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know what I
Yeah.
was trying to
Yeah.
say with that.
No, it makes sense because I realize because I'll get messages from people being like kind of telling me like, hey, you shouldn't be like XYZ. And I'm realizing they only get some like they might see 3 tweets of mine in a row of like I tweet obsessively, obviously, everyone knows this. Of like the 10,000 I posted. And those three communicate like a very one-dimensional person. And this is like so mind-blowing to me that like someone might see 3 tweets of mine that seem really smart and they think like, oh, Dax is a really smart person. And someone else might see 3 tweets where I sound like an idiot and I go, Dax is an idiot. Uh, and I do this with other people. Like I do this with people all the time. So it's just impossible to escape even if you're aware of it. So yeah, it's just this weird thing we all partake in and just leads to all these like weird situations, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's totally different when you've actually interacted with somebody. Like whether it's a video call or you've met at a conference or whatever, you hear their tweets completely differently.
Yeah, yeah.
Like Ryan Florence is that way for me. Before I met Ryan, before I really got
Mhm.
his tone, it was just a completely different person. I just thought he was an asshole. I mean, honestly. And just recently, it's like I've gotten to know him, and now I hear it totally differently. But then I get to see people's reaction to him, and I'm like, yeah, I remember that. I remember feeling that way.
Yeah, and it's like a global community, right? Like everyone has like local cultures are so
Yeah.
deeply a thing. Like
Oh, sure.
I have like me and Adam are totally different. Like I am very like northeastern New York style culture, and everyone I grew up with, when I act the way I do, like it's like a normal thing. But then people from other parts of the world, they're like,
I feel like you're being mean.
I'm like
Because
crossing
in the
lines, or I'm
Midwest, we don't
thinking,
say what we think. We sort of
yeah.
like pretend.
I want to talk about a very specific scenario. I want to bring up the Aaron situation again.
Hmm.
So, do you know Aaron Francis? Dan, he's so he makes a bunch of content. He worked at Planet Scale, extremely talented, like one of the most talented people at like truly explaining.
He's one of those
Oh,
entertainers that
I've
actually
seen.
builds things.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I've seen him. Yeah, I just didn't recognize the name.
Yeah. So he's very legit, and we're friends. He got laid off from Planet Scale, and like he was like trying to figure out what he was going to do. And I made a joke. I replied to him making a joke of being like, "Oh, you're probably tired from begging people to hire you." And a bunch of people saw that and they were like, "Whoa, that's so mean. Like he just got laid off." But in my like weird New York head, the way this works is I'm giving him a compliment because I'm saying, "I believe in you so much that you're so capable and talented that I can say this joke about you because it's so you're obviously going to like things are going to work out." And that's how I like operate with everyone. Like when I'm close to people, I like insult them in that way with the underlying thing being a compliment. But culturally, that's like a very weird specific thing, and some people relate to that, some people don't. But yeah, online it's like a mix of everything, so it's weird.
It is weird. The internet turns out weird, but Dan likes the internet. I mean, we got that quote. I think the internet is good.
Too.
He said,
All my
Yeah,
opportunity,
me too.
Sometimes.
everything I've ever learned.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
I asked if you thought the internet was mean. What I really meant was, do you think Dax is mean? And we got an answer. So
Yeah. There we
we've
go.
been on Twitch this whole time. We didn't acknowledge Twitch at all, but Dan, we're on Twitch. And
Hi,
there's
Twitch.
various things. Hi,
I used
Twitch.
it a couple of times. It's like every time I try to use it, it like makes me watch an ad, and I'm like, never again.
It's more of a place where us entertainers hang out. It's not really a place for people who aren't in that world.
But who has
Yeah.
time to like watch it all? I don't understand.
I don't actually understand the viewing experience. I've tried because I've got a lot of friends that stream on Twitch. It's very hard for me to sit in Twitch chat and get anything done. It's very
Yeah, it's
distracting.
impossible. Yeah, this is another weird dynamic where Dan, you were talking about YouTube stuff earlier. I don't watch any YouTube at all. I don't watch anything technical. Like I will, if I'm like trying to get into a new technical topic, I'll just go watch like the top 3 most important talks or whatever. But besides that, I'm not like don't have like a daily YouTube habit, but this feels like a lot of people do, and it's so wild to me because it's so different from how my day to day goes, or how I learn things. But we do produce this stuff, we just don't, really consume it.
I would love to see Dan on the entertainer arc to become a YouTuber.
Yeah, I wish he became a YouTuber. I would love
that
to
would
see
be so
else.
amazing.
Yeah, I really thought about it, but I don't know. I think like I don't know how. Partially,
You've
it
got
just
really
feels
good
like
hair. Like you would do really well on
That's
YouTube.
like 70%.
I really want
Someone,
your hair.
I
But then you
posted
have to
about-
edit everything, right? Like you have to do this like
I
editing
mean,
thing.
not necessarily. Like Prime, all his YouTube is just like, well, I guess no, Flip edits it. I don't know. I don't know what I'm talking about. People get pretty raw though. I think the Gen Z thing is to like be authentic and like don't edit it much and hold your microphone to your face like a little lapel mic.
a little microphone.
That's like that's the
I
thing
saw
they
Mark
do.
Zuckerberg do that. Yeah.
You'd do so good, Dan. I would watch, and I don't watch YouTube, but I would totally watch.
I'll consider it.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to see what
If you don't
thumbnails I
come
end up
work at
going with.
StatMuse, the offer still stands.
Right.
So you know.
If you get tired of building the future of social media,
Right. Then you could come work for me at StatMuse. It'd be fun.
Yeah.
We'd have a good time. I feel like we should get off here. I don't know. Dan's got IC responsibilities. He's got
it sounds
direct
like
reports.
the app is currently not working. So
Yeah, and Android users are in shambles all over the world.
We have actually like while we were talking, like there's I'm just reading like our Slack, and there's another Android problem.
Oh no. I feel like it's Android's fault. I feel like Android skill
it might
issues.
be more efficient for you guys to figure out how to eliminate Android market
Yeah,
share.
let's
Like,
just
that might actually
exactly.
be a better use of your time.
Thank you so much for coming on, Dan. This is fun. It's nice to
thank you
meet
for
a face to face.
Yeah, thank you for asking all these questions. Usually people just ask me about like Redux or something, so that's
Yeah. The thing you built like 10 years ago. Yeah. Yeah, no. This stuff is super interesting, and I think it was cool to see you move to Bluesky. Obviously, the thing with Twitter, what do they do? They like shadow banned you because you like mentioned Bluesky.
The thing is, like, I feel guilty even like bringing it up because it sounds, like this kind of right wing grifter nonsense. Like, I was
Conspiracy theory, yeah.
But you actually were. Yeah, I remember.
I ran an experiment. Like, it did, the same tweet, both accounts, and like I did a poll, like which, does it show up in For You and following? And for the new account, it was an even split. And for the old account, it was just like 95% or something like this.
Wow,
was
crazy.
in following. And then people who said like For You, they like some of them later said, oh no, it's actually, I just clicked the button or whatever.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I have to say, as annoying that it is, it brings me a lot of joy whenever I read Dan Abramov 2 in your username, because it's so funny. Like, you have to like start over. It's just such a funny thing.
Has anyone searched the open source Twitter algorithm stuff for Dan? Have we looked just to make sure it's not right there in plain sight that they put it in the source code?
yeah.
That is really funny. Okay. Well, thank you for joining us. This was great.
Yeah, we
learning
also
about
don't
this
have like an outro or a way to end
Yeah,
the
we
show,
don't.
so we're just gonna say bye.
awkwardly just go.
Yeah.
Okay.
It just gets
Okay,
harder.
thanks. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thanks again, Dan.
All right. You can stop the recording.
All right.